Okay, good morning. Good morning, everyone. And good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending today's session of the Winter School. Our first session for today is with Professor Tiziano Bonini. Tiziano is an associate professor in Sociology of Culture and Communication in the Department of Social, Political and Cognitive Sciences at the University of Siena in Italy. He co-authored with Emiliano Terere Algorithms of Resistance by MIT Press in 2024. He restricted me to this short biography. I'm not going to use the old one. And with that, I leave the floor to him. Please, Tiziano, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fadi, for this introduction, and thank you to the Arab Center to having me and inviting me to this winter school that I'm really enjoying a lot and learning a lot, especially. What I will do today, I will try to present you the main argument of the book that I co-authored together with Emiliano Terere, and I will try to bridge a reflection between the argument and the book and the topics of this winter school. Then we will see later the connections between the main topic of this winter school and the book, or maybe this could be a matter of further discussion after the presentation. What we believe this book, Algorithms of Resistance, does, in our idea, it should contribute to different fields like critical algorithm studies, digital labor studies, cultural studies, platform studies, social movement studies. You will see, we call this book Algorithms of Resistance, but the title is, I think, is a little bit misleading, because basically this book is about agency. It's about which kind of agency, under which are the constraints, but also the possibilities, the opportunities for the people to exert some kind of agency in the face of platform power. So it's not only about resistance, it's partly about resistance. And there's another keyword that maybe we won't have so much time to delve into it, but there's another keyword that emerged from the fieldwork, and this is solidarity. You will see I'm jumping now to the conclusions, but people never exert agency alone. Most of the time, and they never exert resistance alone. Most of the time, what we found and what really impressed us, because it was a surprising, at least for us, finding of the fieldwork, that there was a lot of solidarity going on, even in this fragmented, precarious, and extremely neoliberal environment that the digital platforms, that commercial digital platforms have built so far. So what this book does, it shifts the focus to the practices and tactics created by people to cope and live with algorithmic power, institutions and authorities. It tries to contrast monolithic accounts of platform power and automation, and it tries to do that exploring algorithmic agency. I will define what is algorithmic agency for us, across gig work, culture, and politics. We explored 3 different fields. It sheds light on how gig workers, content creators, and activists, political activists across the world are developing tactics of algorithmic resistance and agency by appropriating and repurposing the same algorithms that are controlling their lives. And it reveals how forms of algorithmic agency and resistance are endemic and mundane, and how the platform society is a contested battleground of contrasting forces. A very brief glance to the methodology. I won't stress you with that, but there's an entire appendix chapter at the end of the book on that. We conducted in the last few years, we joined our forces and our different backgrounds with Emiliano, and we put together different strands of research. And we did field work in the gig economy sector. We did ethnographies of food delivery workers in 5 different countries, Italy, Mexico, China, India, and Spain. With a lot of interviews in these different countries using the same kind of approach, mixing interviews, classical ethnography, and digital ethnography. Especially, I was into dozens of private WhatsApp groups created by gig workers in different countries for more than 1 year. We did interviews and digital ethnography of content creators on Instagram, and interviews with key media activists, organizers, and practitioners in the global north and south, and among political activists. What are the core concepts of the book? What I will do now, it's a little bit boring, the first 15 minutes, because I will focus on the 2-3 keywords of our theoretical framework, and then I will move on showing you the findings, the empirical findings that should be coherent with our framework. What is algorithmic agency? We draw from, of course, the definition of Anthony Giddens' agency, the ability of human beings to make a difference in the world, that is, to exercise some sort of power. But we complemented it with another definition from Nick Couldry, the longer processes of action based on reflection, making sense of the world so as to act within it. And with another definition coming from Gina Neef and Peter Nagy, about symbiotic agency. Agency is co-constituted in complex interaction between society and technology. So technology is both the constraint and the medium to exert agency. So when we talk about algorithmic agency, we argue that human agency and algorithmic infrastructures mutually shape each other within, of course, in this case, an asymmetrical power relationship. We thus conceive algorithmic infrastructures as Giddens conceived structure, both as the medium and the outcome of the conduct it recursively organizes. So algorithmic agency is, for us, the reflexive ability of humans to exercise power over the outcome of an algorithm. But, of course, this agency, we cannot just stay there, no? Because as soon as we exercise power over the outcome of an algorithm, the algorithm takes this action as an input and realigns itself recursively, no? So, and change it. So the agencies, these agencies are symbiotically embedded in the environment in which it is exercised. People exercise their agency while acting upon certain algorithmic outputs and at the same time by reacting to them. This symbiotic relationship happens within the boundaries of the affordances of the algorithmic infrastructure. So there are a lot of constraints in that shape these, the way we can act upon these infrastructures. This symbiotic approach highlights the complex entanglement between human agency and artificial intelligence. And another keyword is resistance, but we wanted to make it clear that, well, of course, agency does not equal resistance. A lot of practices that we have mapped, we will see, cannot deemed as resistance. It's just a kind of agency that we have called an agency that is aligned to the moral economy of the platforms. And I will then introduce you to this, the third key concept of the book, the moral economy of the platform. So the manifestations of agency we describe move along a continuum that goes from forms of agency openly resisting platform power to other forms of agency that have no intention of questioning or challenging such power. To conceptualize resistance, we turn to the work of sociologists like Jocelyn Hollander and Rachel Einwohner, and we draw from Kurpa Sonnenwalas and Baz, so putting all these together and especially drawing from the definition of resistance given from James Scott, his idea of micro-resistance or infra-politics of resistance or the everyday resistance. We define algorithmic resistance as an act performed by someone upholding a subaltern position or someone acting on behalf of or in solidarity with someone in a subaltern position, and most often responding to power through algorithmic tactics and devices. And then the last part of the last core of our theoretical framework, the intersection between the integration between the concept of the moral economies built from Thompson and Scott and the concept of tactics and strategies drawn from Michel Desserteau. Many of you coming from media and cultural studies background are familiar with the concept of the moral economy. That was actually, there's no space to discussing how this concept was at the core of British cultural studies, but was really actually almost forgot by media studies until David Morley and his team reused moral economy, but in a different way, to develop in the late 90s, in the early 90s, the domestication theory of the information communication technologies. That was actually the only time in which media studies the moral economy was applied. We want to use it in a slightly different way. Usually what Thompson intended as a moral economy, a specific set of moral values, habits, and beliefs that shape the individual's view of the economy. And according to some other cultural historians like Andrew Sawyer that interpreted the work of Thompson, all economies are suffused with values and beliefs about what constitutes proper activity, regarding rights and responsibilities of individuals and institutions, and qualities of goods, service and environment. So all economies, even the market economy, are moral economies in terms that they have specific values and ideas about how people should behave within that kind of economy. So Thompson argues that human agency can be influenced by different moral economies. Distinguishing these economies is important because it helps us understand the different reasons and values that drive human agency. So our first proposal, theoretical proposal in the book, is to distinguish the various forms of human agency available in coping with algorithms, what we have called in the first chapter of algorithmic agency, along a continuum shaped by moral values. And we see two extremes, two ideal types, two extremes, two competing moral economies, platform and user moral economies. If you look at, this is a way of trying to synthesizing these ideas. So we recognized, even this was emerging from the field work, different moral economies. So what is the moral economy of commercial digital platforms? They are centered on neoliberal values like individualism, consumerism, data extractivism, optimization of performance, self-entrepreneurship, meritocratic ideology, authentic competition between users. All these kind of behaviors like self-entrepreneurship, the idea that the algorithm is meritocratic, the idea that the competition between the users should be based on authentic contents and behavior. All these, we can also call it an ideology, but is coded into the affordance, into the design of the apps. So, for example, if you look at the food delivery apps, they are designed to put these couriers, these workers, to compete against each other, not to cooperate with each other. There are no chats to talk between each other because they have to be divided and algorithmically governed from the top. The datification process, the data extraction of their behavior is normal and is codified, is a structural feature of these apps. So the idea of putting these workers into a huge competition, into transforming the urban texture into a playground where couriers are just competing against each other, and the algorithm is an objective computational tool that distributes more work to the best performing worker is an ideology that is coded into the app. And these also, to us, seems that this is a moral economy, a specific moral economy. So the moral values of the designers are coded into the platform, and they govern how people should behave. What is the proper behavior? So riders or content creators or users of algorithmic mediated media receive rules and have to respect norms, the terms of services, the standards of the community. They are trained and disciplined in behaving in a certain way that is considered legitimate by the platform, according to certain moral values. On the other side, we discover that a lot of people do not do not agree with these terms of service. They do not respect them. They do not feel that they are fair, especially when they are affecting their economy. Exactly what happens, not exactly, but what when Thompson analyzed the food riots in UK between the 17th and the 19th century, he said that there was an emerging new market economy that was establishing itself at the time, and there was establishing also the logic of the market prices, while the peasants didn't accept this logic when it affected, for example, the price of bread. And they said that no matter the logic of the market, bread shouldn't. The price of bread shouldn't increase too much because it was a basic food, and it is not fair, it is not moral that bread would cost so much. So they opposed the moral economy of the. So they rioted not because they were irrational actors, but they were trying to rationally impose their moral economy. This is the argument of Thompson, very in a nutshell. And accordingly, we have found that, for example, gig workers that do not accept low prices of the orders, do not accept the low number of orders that are coming in. They riot and protest and organize because while I was reading this private chat, these conversations, most of the time they were mobilizing words like, this is not fair, this is unfair, this is not moral, they are immoral. If they are immoral, I want to break their rules. They are so a lot. It was this idea of the moral economy was grounded in the data, because after reading these conversations and coding these words, we got this idea that maybe there is something moral, there's a moral discourse going on in these conversations, and this means something. So that there are the moral economies of the platform, or the commercial platforms, but there are also other kind of moral economies. For example, we mapped at least 3 different moral economies among the users. Moral economies centered on social collectivist values like mutual support, cooperation between users, political awareness, struggle organization, strong sense of solidarity, while the other ones centered on what Soriano and Cabañas called entrepreneurial solidarity, a kind of solidarity between freelancers that are not questioning the market logic, the free market logic. And then other moral economies centered on pirate or free rider ethics that are not respecting, that are violating the terms of service of the platform, but just for themselves. So if we summarize all these discourse, we can have at least so far 2 different kinds of agency. One that is leaning more towards the respect, a manifestation of algorithmic agency aligned or to the platform moral economy, and another one that is not aligned to the platform moral economy. But it is in the reality, it's a continuum. It's not a just black and white distinction. But this is not enough, no? The moral dimension is key to understand algorithmic agency, but it's not sufficient because not everybody is able to exert agency over algorithms in the same way. What platforms and media call gaming efforts and they deem these efforts of cheating the algorithms or circumventing them or repurposing them, they usually call these actions as illegitimate, as criminal, as immoral, and they call them gaming efforts. But to game the algorithms, you need time, informations, technical skills, monetary resources, and often you have to orchestrate collective actions. So some will be in a better position to game the algorithms than others, no? So our second proposal is therefore to add a further dimension to the moral dimension of algorithmic agency, which brings into the equation the type of power held by subjects that enact algorithmic agency. This further dimension is articulated along a second continuum between 2 poles: tactical algorithmic agency and strategic algorithmic agency. And we took this from Desserteau. So we can distinguish at least 2 other ideal types of agency, the tactical and the strategic. What I mean, this is another continuum. So we can have, when we talk about strategic agency, we talk of a kind of agency that people that have high availability of time, money, and expertise against people that have low or no availability of time, money, and expertise. So from this distinction, we can have this is our final framework. This is our typology of algorithmic agency. We can have at least 4 ideal types of algorithmic agency that distinguish themselves for being leaning toward platform or user moral economies and being influenced by strategic or tactical resources. This means that, for example, all the efforts of computational propaganda or click and troll farms are, in our understanding, a form of strategic algorithmic agency. So an institution, maybe a state, a party that has money, time, and expertise to strategically, in the long run, game the algorithms of the platforms to gain more visibility, to pollute a conversation online, or to attack some political adversary. Usually social movements or political activists do not have all the resources, all the necessary resources to make strategic plans in the long run. No? So but this is a continuum, and the people and the practices move and swing along this continuum. You shouldn't take these metrics as just as a fixed and established framework. So then now I will quickly go through a couple of examples in the domain of gig work and cultural consumption, and I will focus more on political activism. In the fieldwork that we have done in these 5 countries of food delivery workers, we have mapped a lot of practices. Of course, if we do this fieldwork today instead of in 2021 when we started this fieldwork, you could maybe find different practices. This is just a photograph, an image of that very moment. So what is really important is not the single practice, because it could have been changed so far. What is important is that I'm sure that if you go into fieldwork today in another country, after 3 years, 3 years after our fieldwork, you would find maybe other kind of tactics. Because what is really important, what is the real finding, I think, is that users are always adapting, as platforms do themselves in this symbiotic environment, to new to the apps, to the affordances of the app, and they always find a loop, or always search for a loophole in these new environments. So if the design of the platform changes, they adapt this, they react themselves. And sometimes they also not only react, but even create new stuff. For example, Indonesian riders even developed their own apps. So we don't have the time to delve into all these kind of tactics. We divided them into individual and collective tactics, but also the individual tactics most of the time were relying on the collective endeavor to share these tactics. So riders knew these tactics by their personal experience, or most of the time by sharing these tricks within the WhatsApp groups in which they were part of. The collective tactics were the more interesting ones, like solidarity, logout. All of them orchestrate a logout, a collective logout, in order to affect the platform as a form of protest, or they try to mutually exchange working hours, even if the design of the platform prevent the workers to exchange working hours. It is impossible by design, but they found a way to orchestrate the exchange of working hours. Or for example, there was this coordinated rejection of orders there for 2 reasons: to push the algorithm to increase the price of an order, or to reject the orders collectively as a form of protest, or refusing incoming orders, or other forms of cheating. Like in China, they have a specific word for shuadan, means artificially, deceptively create fake orders in order to increase your orders, and to sometimes just earn a free pizza. Most of these tactics are just ways of surviving in this environment. They are nothing they have nothing to do with political awareness, nothing to do with revolutionizing or contesting platform capitalism. They are just there for surviving. But there is always something that exceeds these surviving tactics. And most of the time, from these surviving tactics, many workers then develop and understand or build networks of solidarity and develop some level of awareness. Especially, I think it was really important for us the relevance that all these private chat groups had within gig workers. Through the creation of informal online groups, workers challenged the values inscribed in the apps they used to work. No, the creation of these groups allows them to practically integrate the missing affordances of the platforms they work for. And in our understanding, in our fieldwork, we understood that these private chat groups work as infrastructures of learning, resistance, and solidarity. So at the same time, they are learning environments where the workers learn how to become a professional workers, to learn the tricks of the trade, learn how to do this job, because they are not receiving any kind of training from the platform, from the company, because they are, to use a Marxian word, an army that is a disposable army that can be easily replaced. They are places where resistance is organized. Someone, Mark Graham and Ferrari, called the WhatsApp groups of food delivery workers as hidden transcripts of resistance, where people organize themselves and talk about it. Maybe they do not publicly accuse platforms, but they, in these private groups, organizing their resentment. And there are, most of the time, and most importantly, places where solidarity is built day by day. Just an example, a Neapolitan rider was affected by they stolen his motorbike, and after 2 hours, the riders of the chat not only left their work to go back to him and to rescue him, but they also started a crowdfunding online to raise the money to buy to him another motorbike. This is not competition, no? This is against the odds. This is against all odds and against all our idea that this is impossible. In this kind of competitive environment, people are just put one against each other. So there was a lot of mutual benefit and support that was surprising for us. And the southeast we were going, and the more acts of solidarity we were finding. Maybe I don't. What the time is? Well, I have to move on. So maybe I will skip what happens in the cultural industries, like, for example, Korean pop fandoms that are able to cheat and inflate Spotify charts in an artificial way through coordinated action to push their Benjamins, their idols, on top of the charts, exploiting the algorithmic logic of Spotify. And I will turn into gaming politics, or the way political activists, but not only political activists, but also political parties and political institutions are cheating or exerting some kind of agency against the algorithmic logic of the platforms. We have a paper on that with Emiliano about the way users exploit algorithms, and we define algorithmic activism as a way of there are two different kinds of algorithmic activism. Activism against the relevance of algorithms, so algorithms as a stake, but the kind of algorithmic activism that we focus on is the one that understands algorithms as a repertoire of contentious actions. As a repertoire, what I mean by repertoire, as a weapon, as a tool to exert your political activism. So there are, if we understand algorithms as a repertoire of action, of political action, we think that we can distinguish three different ways of algorithmic activism: algorithmic amplification, evasion, and hijacking. Algorithmic amplification is the most investigated and the most popular one. There are a lot of, for example, hashtag activism, no? The way Me Too, Black Lives Matter, or 15M movement, social movements, how do they use the hashtag, leveraged on hashtags during the last years to amplify their narratives, to amplify their voice, to acquire more visibility while strengthening their agency and narrative capacity. And there is a lot of research on that, like hashtag activism book, for example. Or in other cases, activists can also rely on algorithms to amplify the visibility of someone, to expose them with the objective of arting their public image, for example. Let's get Green Day American Idiot to #1 on the day Trump arrives in the UK. That was a way of some political activists decided to leverage on Spotify algorithm, clicking all together on American Idiot, in a way of ironically welcome Trump in the UK. But then there are other practices that are more interesting than algorithmic amplification, and there are the evasion and hijacking. What we mean by evasion? Activists fighting against digital platforms' codes and algorithmic regulations to have their voices heard. And this has to do with a wide cast of different kind of movements, like vaccine opposed groups, like pro-eating disorder groups on Instagram, but also pro-Palestine supporters and activists on Twitter. What happened? That content moderation is still hard on platforms and is based on is both automated and human-based. No, there are human moderators and algorithms that are policing contents on social platforms for the good and for the bad, and they are shadow banning or even banning some kind of contents based on a dictionary that is evolving every day. So in the case, for example, of pro-eating disorder, the algorithmic moderation codes of Instagram, but also Twitter, they are looking for example, hashtag like pro-Ana, to shadow ban the content related with this hashtag. So pro-eating disorder groups on Instagram, what they do is continuously transliterate this hashtag using codes that are not understood by the algorithms. And this happened also with pro-Palestine supporters on the early weeks of after October 7. So on Twitter, all the contents that were including hashtags, but also they just mentioned free Palestine or this kind of manifestations pro-Palestine were shadow banned and were diminished in terms of visibility. So people users found ways of circumventing this algorithmic policy by using symbols like the watermelon instead of the hashtag of Free Palestine, or other kind of symbols that were not detected and considered at that time as included in the dictionary of the moderation. But this happens also with the why we say that algorithmic agency is agnostic, that there is nothing romantic in that. Because these kind of practices are being weaponized and used by all the political spectrum, from the left and from the right. So extreme wing political activists in Italy, these are a couple of Twitter examples I found during the fieldwork. They used codes like that. Are you able to read these tweets? No, because they are using a specific code that is understandable only by a small circle of people to insult or to usually they insult women, free leftist female political activists. With sexist comments or aggressive comments, that hate speech that is not detected by the algorithm. So they evade the algorithmic policing of the platform in this way. And this is, you can find it in different places, while especially among the extreme right European political activists that developed a very ingenious, brilliant code of ways of evading this. Then algorithmic hijacking, for example, one of the most I think scary examples of that. There was a cop in the US that was being filmed while he was arresting a black Afro-American citizen in the US, and it was being recorded and live streamed on YouTube. And he took his smartphone, and played a music with his smartphone. And because he knew that the YouTube algorithm would have detected those music in the background as a copyrighted material, so that it would immediately shut down the live streaming of that content. This is a way of hijacking, in our understanding, the efforts of the efforts of political activists online. So you see, there is a battleground going on from different parts of the political spectrum. Jumping to the conclusions. In the last chapter, we tried to reflect a little bit on the limits and the frontiers of the automated society, and where we are leading to. Will AI outsmart us and pose an existential threat to humans, like Geoffrey Hinton, Elon Musk are saying? This description, well, I think that I side with Kate Crawford instead of Elon Musk, because as she says, that are we really being automated by the smart machines of digital capitalism without resistance? Are we facing again the return of an apocalyptic and deterministic vision of media and technology? This new emphasis on how digital platforms, AI systems, and algorithmic or automated media influence politics, enslave human labor, and shape cultural industries, exerting an increasingly ubiquitous form of power, risk losing sight of the space still available to people. In all these grand narratives of the current condition of increasingly mediatized capitalist democracies, there is something apparently minuscule and mundane that escapes the broad meshes of communicative or platform capitalism theories. What escapes their gaze are the thousands of microscopic acts of agency and resistance to the narrative force of platform capitalism, which materialize in the appropriation by ordinary people, workers, and activists of the tools of networked communication first and algorithms today, to put them in the service not of a neoliberal ethos, but of a cooperative and solidarity agenda. So Although we are immersed in this deeply mediatized ecosystem and we live a media life, our relationship with digital platforms is never frictionless. Users and platforms, human and non-human subjects, co-inhabit this ecosystem in complex ways. The relationship that we have with the algorithms that populate our daily lives is symbiotic and recursive. While it is true that algorithms learn quickly from users' gaming attempts and therefore are able to realign themselves, users are also capable of readjusting themselves to face the new challenges posed by algorithms. Now you should start seeing the link between this book and the topic of this winter school. I will highlight this link in a while, and I'm going to the conclusions. So, algorithmic agency, what we have seen that what we found is that algorithmic agency across gig work, culture, and politics, but even other domains that could be investigated, in all these domains, there is a common feature to all the practices that we have observed. This agency is rarely exercised in complete solitude, carried out by a single individual without the help or partial cooperation of some other person. So cooperation is the key word in all these fieldworks, in all these fields. And why we think the moral economy is a relevant concept. If we think about, these classical paper of science technology studies, Langdon winner, do artifacts have politics? All artifacts, in fact, reflect the culture of their makers. Building on the American social scientist Langdon winner, we could say that artifacts, technological artifacts like digital platforms, do not only have politics, but they carry out specific moralities. And this is our final contribution. At the end of the book, we try to situate all the practices that we mapped in the book that emerged from the fieldwork in one of these 4 dimensions. So the resistance dimension is I would say, on the low left side of the framework. All the practices that are on the leaning to the platform moral economy cannot be deemed as resistance, but just algorithmic agency aligned to the moral economy of the platform. People that are not questioning and are acting according to the rules and to the terms of services. But then there are a lot of people that, for many different reasons, for the bad and for the good, being Bulgarian scammers, being K-pop, being computational propaganda, being gig workers surviving their environment, a lot of people, for very different reasons, from very different political spectrum, are not respecting and are resisting, physically and digitally resisting or collectively resisting these rules. Takeaways from for this, just the last 2 slides. So social media platforms are owned by very powerful technology companies, perhaps more powerful than the media conglomerates of the past, which controlled and still control Western legacy media. With their algorithmic visibility policies, these platforms have the power to set and influence the global agenda of information. They can give maximum visibility to Elon Musk's every single word, or render invisible the voices of pro-Palestinian activists from Gaza. But either way, hegemonic narratives of ongoing wars do not impose themselves without friction. Although favored by the algorithmic affordances of platforms of commercial Western digital platforms, these narratives are contested, negotiated, overturned with the same algorithmic weapons used by platforms. At times, this capacity for user agency also leads to giving visibility to conspiracy or far-right narratives, which is why we speak in the book of the agnosticism of algorithmic agency. More generally, however, our framework could help to think of the whole environment of digital platforms as a cultural background, where people with different ideologies clash with the moral economy of platforms and are never entirely passive in the face of platform power. So there are now 4 different takeaways. Hegemonic narratives do not impose themselves without friction. Computational propaganda and disinformation for hire, for example, are exploiting algorithmic logic and polluting the platform ecosystem. The agnosticism of this kind of algorithmic agency, and the idea that digital platforms are battlegrounds where users clash with the platform's moral economy. We cannot only focus on the power platforms have, surely they have, in shaping the global public sphere. The recurring mistake that sometimes we do is to believe that just being exposed to a particular media narrative means being influenced by it. Instead, we should return, as British cultural studies did, to studying the power that ordinary people have, or at least the decoding power, that the differentials in the decoding power that people have in shaping the global public sphere. In this case, we should ask not only what algorithms do to the people, but what do people do with algorithms? And that's my final take. Thanks.
Thank you for very interesting and fascinating presentation. I do have some comments before opening the floor to questions. One of my first comments is that I'm afraid we are at a point blaming the algorithms. So algorithms are now the actual Elon Musk, Zuckerberg, these guys are not the villains anymore. It's the algorithms, right? So we somehow find a nice thing to place the blame on. Another stakeholder that I also find missing, and I'm not sure, maybe the book has, you only have 40 minutes, so probably, are the actual stakeholders behind the platforms. The advertisers, the governments, the funders, the people who really buy and sell the data. Another point also here comes to mind is algorithms don't work alone, they need data. Resistance is necessary for the algorithms to be better next time, right? So that makes us another question, like it's in line of your question, what do people do to algorithms? Is it possible to resist algorithms within their own battleground, or you need to open your own field, your own other media of communication, other ways of doing so? So these are my few comments in here, and I open the floor to questions. I don't know if you want to respond to this. And
yeah, because first I forgot the point. Yeah, of course, algorithms are socio-technical ensembles, socio-technical environment. So they are basically they are just rules, no? So there are someone that decides the rules. So which kind of rules have to apply? And this is exactly what we mean when we say that there is a moral economy of the algorithm. What is the moral economy of the algorithm? The moral economy of the algorithms depend on the values, the moral beliefs, and the idea, the values and the moral beliefs of the people behind them. So if we delve into that institution, we say that there is a lot of negotiations and contestations within the company when they are designing a platform. No? So there are the engineers, the marketers, the interaction designers, the politicians, the political constraints, the marketing aims. All these actors and factors are shaping the way algorithms are designed, and the aims and the rules that are finally chosen and coded into the algorithm, and the kind of the way they datify the users, the kind of data they give relevance or not. All these are human choices, no? And that can be shaped. So in a platform, in a cooperative platform environment, for example, there are different kind of choices are being made in terms of datafication. So it really depends on the moral economy of the platform. And the second point is, is about the data well, we explain in the book how datafication works for in the case of gig economy. But I think though, the book is missing something that you can find, for example, in Shoshana, in the first section of the book of Shoshana Zuboff. This is an amazing and brilliant work in showing us how companies are datafying subjects and how data is important is relevant for the platform, for the surveillance capitalism model. But then we decided to kind of, this book is kind of a humble answer to that book, in my view, because she just showed us the power of platforms, and we just try to show the agency of the people.
Thank you. Questions? Let's see. Start from the right guard.
Thank you very much for sharing this wonderful research. I understand things are getting a bit dystopian. Looking into the political sphere or the public sphere changing into the corporate sphere, the agents are getting limited. In other words, we have hoped to make this world a better place to live through political practices and social practices, but now the world is becoming more of a marketing, the way you try to explain, or the way I try to get, I got from your, I was just looking at what is new in there. Is there any room for political action? Because I'm getting a sense that your work is also reflecting as if this resistance, as you mentioned, is also part of this algorithm to make it run, to make it well-oiled. So is there any room for resistance? That would be the question. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to follow on from that. I mean, it's wonderful to hear the emphasis on agency and resistance, but the way that you've conceptualized it, the modes of activity, makes me think about, about the scope of the actions themselves, because it seems as if you've conceptualized the resistance as taking place pretty much exclusively through algorithms themselves. And I think that's a wider question around political practice that takes place well beyond the algorithms. Otherwise, we run the risk of reproducing the logic of the algorithms themselves. And I think it's even more important when you focus on our theme around war, because these are higher stakes, these are more deadly technologies, these are more protected technologies, and yet there are all sorts of resistance. It's harder to, what your words, to hijack a military technology requires some significant degree of skill. So instead we find direct action. In terms of British companies providing arms to Israel, they're not hijacking, it's not algorithmic resistance, it is direct action trying to occupy the factories, or it is mass protests, which undermine, I would argue, the commodity status of those particular algorithms. So in a way, it is just going back to this question, why conceptualize algorithmic resistance exclusively in terms of algorithmic activity?
Hi, thank you so much for this fascinating talk. I had a question about the recent Facebook decision to remove the moderation, for example, from the algorithms of Facebook and everything Elon Musk has done to Twitter since he took over. Is this good or bad? I mean, in your opinion, how's that going to change the whole sort of balance of resistance versus whatever it is that's happening?
Thank you, Dr. Tiziano. There is one thing that actually bothers me. Actually, I cannot understand. What's the purpose of fighting the algorithms? You showed that post on X that there is a code, right? And you said a small number of people can understand it. So why should we put the code in X if no one can understand? Isn't it the purpose to get a high reach? And if only a small number of people can understand and decode the code, why do we need to use it and post it there? And about how to fight and why to fight algorithm that way with the codes?
Thanks for the questions that allow me to qualify a little bit our argument. I will conflate the first two questions because they are pretty similar in a way. And I will start from your question. First, when I basically agree with you, but the first move for us was, the first aim was to show that there is a kind of resistance that is going on through algorithms. So, but of course there is a lot of resistance and a lot of, that is direct resistance that is not, so we are not saying that there is only algorithm resistance, but so far these kind of practices and acts through algorithms have been overlooked, or so we are just trying to foreground it. And of course, if you foreground it and you focus on it, it seems that you are just saying that this is resistance, no? And you are forgetting all the forms that are of direct resistance. So we distinguish between resistance against algorithms or against platforms through direct action, through traditional or informal forms of protest and resistance. But we said we want to focus on this because there is few understanding of this. And then there's another, through the fieldwork emerged another thing, that I agree with you that most of the time these kind of practices are not really, cannot deemed as political action, real political action, or real or structural forms of resistance. And we, so you say, where is the real space for political action? Because this kind of action, most of the time, just fuel the platform, no? And this is the classic, and I think criticism that we receive. And there are two ways of answering this. First, we can call back the concept of James Scott, the infrapolitics of resistance. So most of the resistance that he mapped in his work back in the 70s was contested from the other scholars for not being resistance. And he said that it was all those acts of sabotage and all those everyday practices that he described were infrapolitics. So they didn't have a political consciousness, and they were just aimed at surviving, not subverting the system. And sometimes they were also fueling the system in a way, not really contesting it. But James Scott, at the end of the weapons of the week, said something that that is really useful for us. That maybe most of the time these practices cannot really change the balance of the balance of power, and they are not political, but there is no possibility of change and political action coming from outside or from the top, or most of the workers that we have observed for a long time just stayed at the infrapolitics level. But some of them, through these practices, understood their condition of exploitment, and they moved on towards more structural forms of political action that were not only algorithmic, that were traditionally trade unions, new trade unions organization, new mutual benefit association to support each other, to build a welfare state, a welfare service that was not provided neither by the state, neither by the companies. So in James Scott's idea, these kind of practices is kind of training people to produce from within a political consciousness that could potentially be turned into more structural forms of political action and more structural forms of resistance. Most of the time, we use also the frame of Stuart Hall. These kind of practices that we described are just rituals, forms of resistance, like the subcultures that Stuart Hall described in the 70s, ritual forms. Working class youngsters that are punk, are not really subverting, but they are symbolically saying something about their identity. They don't want to be like their fathers. Finally they really were. They weren't able to change their life for the best, just being punk. But so most of the time, these are rituals. So we show the limits of these practices, but we also see the potentialities of these practices. Also, because they are entangled, these practices, with traditional forms of resistance and direct forms of actions. And so there is the third question. I don't know if I framed the Zuckerberg is well. The problem with content moderation was that was an imperial concession from these rich people. No, so far they decided the limitations. And the reaching of these and the reach out of these moderation. So there is nothing good in their way of moderating contents. Before there were a lot of bias and a lot of problems again with the exploitment of content moderators in the global south. So content moderation ecosystem was extremely problematic. But the decision to give away with that is even more problematic, because it's just saying, even instead of regulating and improving and standardizing that kind of content moderation to kind of democratic or values that are so regulated by European Union or United States, so trying to improve the condition of content moderation, so putting standards to increase the conditions of content moderation labor instead of criticizing from auditing and discussing a more efficient and more democratic way of moderating contents. They are just, instead of choosing, I would say, a social democratic way to content moderation online, they are just they choose the anarcho-liberalist way of about to moderate content. No, they just leave the people free to say whatever they want. So I think it's even more problematic than before. But we cannot just say that we were happy with the way content moderation was done before.
Thank you for a great presentation. I'm not sure to what extent you are familiar with the Latin American case in terms of platform capitalism, because with the Latin American case on platform capitalism, because this region stands out for being a very quick adopter of platforms, especially as a way for people to increase their income. And in this process, it's something that has happened in the last, let's say, 3 to 5 years, is that a lot of these platform workers who initially enter these platforms working with this idea of be your own boss, generate your own income, work in your own time, that on some level both alienates them for the products of their labor and also alienates them from their peers, have started unionizing, and they have been resisting these platforms' impositions, and they have been lobbying for to gain the worker status rather than this individual capitalist self-employed status, and they have been moderately successful at that. They are earning, for instance, healthcare. They are earning rights to social security and such.
Hi, thank you so much for this fascinating presentation. I just want to ask about what I'm just thinking now is resistance and anticipation. So there is in your digital ethnography, did you come across users who basically anticipate that the platform is going, or algorithms is going to prevent them from using certain terminology? So they anticipate and they find ways around what they think that this terminology is going to be, banned, or their account is going to be shadow banned. And I'm just thinking of, for instance, the war on Gaza, in Lebanon. We've seen lots of users who are actually going far beyond, making sure that either Instagram or Facebook or X or even TikTok won't really go into shadow banning them, or sometimes remove their posts from the platform.
Shukran. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a wonderful discussion, of course, but there is a lot of theoretical debates here that are far from the case studies so far for me, because you talk about power, agency, resistance, power as a relationship, and digital media, and moral economy, and the weapons of the week of James Scott and Gene Sharp's work. But how do you connect those theoretical debates to the data you provided? Especially, you're talking about the weapons of the weak, the ordinary people. The power of the people you're talking about is basically the power of the ordinary people who are doing the daily interactions with the digital media and the moral economy. And it's far from what James Scott mentioned in the weapons of the week. It's a slightly different concept, because that was a peasant concept, but here it's slightly, I think it has to do with digital media and maybe different tools of resistance. And it goes back again to the idea of what is resistance in this case. I think that's the core question that you might want to bring some from the field data. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this terrific discussion. I want to touch upon a point Fadi mentioned, which is data. So, as we know that the big companies, they are based in the big powers, if you like, and big states. And these algorithms depend mostly on data. And they use them in different ways. For example, Elon Musk is trying to push away traditional news media outlets, and mostly his platform is using data from its own X, for example, sources, and other sources they deem as reliable. Then if we look at data, if we go back a little bit, there is something called poison in the well, or poison in the data, basically to game algorithms one way or another. Are there any instances where non-state actors, or even smaller state actors, or countries that do not have the technology, where they are actively poisoning data so that they can game the algorithm? Do you have any instances of that? Because this could form one way of resisting algorithms, by basically, because they cannot stop their own citizens, if you like, using these data. Yesterday, Layla Adams was saying that in Iran, Instagram is one of the main platforms used by Iranians. I'm sure, I'm focused on intelligence studies, I'm sure that some intelligence agencies are closely monitoring data from Instagram. So the Iranian government, by not being able to stop its own citizens using these platforms, they would actively try to poison the data, so to mislead, if you like, other governments understanding what's going on and monitoring what's going on in Iran.
Hello, thank you, Sébastien Pala from Paris University. I thank you for your talk. I think it was really necessary to have someone at this winter school that works on the people and not the powers, on the practices of the people that use and consume the media, and here the digital medias or platforms, and not the powers that forms these structures. To create a form of balance, to find ways out of the kind of, I think, structuralistic way of seeing media and technology. Because the whole point, if I can resume it, of your, or synthesize it, of your lecture, is that powers are not infallible. There is always resistance that the medias, for instance, are not representative of what the people thinks, and that forming narratives is not enough, is not the same as making narratives live in the mind of the peoples that hears them. So my question now is that, do you think resistance is enough, and do you see ways of going beyond resistance and start not to be in resistance, but maybe in construction of new practices, of new digital media, etc. For instance, what do you think of the blue sky migration? Do you consider it resistance, or maybe a way of founding or a creation of a new and less power-centered digital practices?
We are focusing on alternatives. Which are the alternatives? Okay, I try to. I will start with your question. I didn't answer it. Think about the case of Indian gig workers that we interviewed. They didn't even know what an algorithm was. They were not really able to define what an algorithm. They didn't even know how does it function, and this doesn't matter. What we understand, that we found that this doesn't matter, because other people training. Sometimes he found some tutorial on YouTube and TikTok, and then he was talking with other workers through WhatsApp groups and chats, and he understood. So he learned some tricks to cheat the algorithm, even if it doesn't know what to do. And this was really important for him, because he was able to earn. He was very poor, and he was able to eat more every day and to earn a little bit. That was a survival line for him. And he was surviving this environment only because he was able to apply these tactics that were not subverting the system at all. And he didn't want it. And he didn't even know of the importance of subverting the system. But he was understanding, even if he didn't understand algorithms. So why it is important to do that? For them, it is important. Maybe not for me. About anticipating question, I do not have examples of that. It would be interesting to look more on that. How do they anticipate these patterns? Or what they do is they try to. They always are one step ahead of the detection systems, no? And it's always a cat and mouse dynamic, but I don't know of any kind of practice of anticipating these patterns. About the question of the connection between the weapons of the weak and what is the data. I didn't have the time to delve into the gig workers case, but for us was really easy to do this connection, and maybe this was not clear in the presentation. But sabotage, peasant in the book of Scott were sabotaging the arrival of the green revolution in agriculture, sabotaging the machines. couriers, workers too, were trying to apply sabotage to the machine, rejecting the orders, collectively rejecting the orders, putting a stick, for a temporary stick, in the platform dynamics. For example, the sabotage was one of the most interesting part, but another one resembling the practices of the peasants of Scott were food dragging in Scots peasants to slowing down the process. They did it in, the workers did a lot of time slow down the rhythm of their work by rejecting, by refusing, by convincing others, by slowing down the pace of their riding or collectively, because they know that if all of us run faster and faster, the algorithm will adjust and the prices will lower because they will understand that. So the faster all the community of riders goes through electrical bicycle, and the lower the average time of delivery is. And accordingly, the prices adjust. So if we slow down together, we prevent the decreasing of the price of the order. This is like, for me, it's like food dragging. And is an everyday practice of resistance. You are not able to destroy your enemy, but you are trying to slowing down the impact of his power. What you were saying is more. I do not have examples. I do not know so far of efforts of polluting the data or cheating the data as a form of activism. It could be extremely interesting. No, it is more, again, we got data activism instead of algorithmic activism. These are just academic categories. What is really important is activism, political activism. But so far, I don't have clues, or I don't know of examples of this kind of activism. But I'm sure that it could be the case somewhere. Blue sky, so alternatives. In the last part of the book, we look for alternatives. So of course, a lot of people, and this is close to your question, to your comments, no? A lot of people a lot of riders and workers, especially in the gig working sector, you have to say, but also in the political activists that are leaving Twitter and for other platforms, no? We do not think that blue sky is a form of resistance. It's maybe middle class, white, Western middle class forms of resistance, maybe elite forms of resistance. But it's nothing different. Maybe it's a commercial platform. But there are a lot of alternatives going on. So people. Workers, but also content creators are funding trade unions, protesting. In the case of Mexico, couriers really founded, former digital platform couriers founded their own informal networks of delivering outside of the platform, with restaurants, with small networks of people, informal economy. But then others founded platform cooperatives, not only in Italy, but all over in India too. There is a food cycle cooperative that is networking and providing digital platforms, open source digital platforms for more than 100 cooperatives around the world. And this is not an alternative and a solution to platform capitalism. If you look back to the Industrial Revolution, cooperative forms didn't destroy it and didn't won over capitalism, but they increased in the last, from Rochdale moment, when 1834 onwards. So the cooperative economic model established itself as a reality into the market, between the market and the state economy. So we will see in the future more of these cooperative platforms, a lot of more of them, even in both in the gig economy and in social networks for content-based platforms. Like Mastodon is not a good example, but federative platforms are. So we are just at the beginning of a new age in which maybe we won over digital capitalism, but we sure are contesting. There are a lot of people are contesting it, and there are finding solutions. Most of the time, it's just surviving, infrapolitics of that. But sometimes there is not only a ritual or everyday resistance. There is more resistance coming out from this kind of resistance. We cannot dismiss everyday resistance and ritual resistance, because these kind of practices pose the seeds for more structural. You cannot, because people are. They have to understand their condition of exploitment before searching for other alternatives. You cannot convince people that they are exploited or that these platforms are just bad because you just say that to them as an intellectual. This is Leninism, basically. So I lean for more forward forms. I'm looking why it is important to look at these forms of practices, not because they are subverting the system, but because they are seeds of solidarity and agency resistance that sometime, somewhere, are leading also towards forms of alternatives. People are not happy with that, look for alternatives. And sometimes they are building smart alternatives. Of course, you need politics and to create the right environment for these alternatives to thrive, to grow. And they are not they're not able to grow alone, but the federative and cooperative movement in food delivery is growing and is being a reality, a small reality. Is giving work to very few people so far, but hundreds of people, and is growing in the global south and in the north. So just to say, I don't want to seem too optimistic, but it's just to say that there is something going on. It's not just this bleak image of digital capitalism that is destroying all our life without that people are doing nothing. No, there are some alternatives that are popping up, and we are just at the beginning. Like at the early stage of the Industrial Revolution, it took 200 years to the English working class to become a working class and to gain some benefit from it. 200 years. This is another stage of industrial capitalism. It's not new. No, we are into this long durée of industrial capitalism, intensified by digital tools, and users and maybe workers are trying tirelessness or are trying to adapt to this new environment, and are not passive at all.
Okay. Maybe two more questions? No? Okay. More questions? I think. Okay. Go ahead, please.
Hi, my question is specifically about Meta and about Facebook, as I know most about that one platform. But basically, the way content operates there, it's a very conflicting interplay between regulations, algorithm, and content that makes money. So perhaps, well, that's what I think, they ease those regulations nowadays because the content that makes money usually is not the content that aligns with the regulations. So the more sensational things, if there are I don't know, gossips, anything. That's what makes money. And the thing is that when you actually publish content on that platform, you still go around the regulations. You just have to be smart about how you phrase things to go around it. So my question is that is this process of easing the regulations and tightening them, democratization and restriction, is it cyclical from your experience? And how do you think, is there any role that users play in this decision, or it's only big players like government regulations, political situation, etc.?
We have a voice. This is a question for Tarleton Gillespie, that is the expert on the content moderation. No? So, and he says something very interesting, that the economic model, the business model of these platforms is based on finding the right balance between noise and content and signal. So there you have to if they tighten too much the regulation, the moderation, they lose the audience. If they ease it too much, they increase the background noise, and they lose again. Look at Twitter. A lot of people, 25 million of people left Twitter because of the easing of the content moderation. So they have in order to achieve the profit, they have to strike a balance between these two. But they are not so free. They are not free in pursuing their economic aims, because there is politics around. So after 2016, they didn't enforce their rules just because they wanted to do that. They did it because the audience and the public sphere, in terms of politics and the audience and the users, were accusing them of having contributed to the Trump election. So in that kind of political atmosphere, they defended themselves, tightening the regulation, but unilaterally decided how to do that. That's the problem, no? They just did it because the public sphere was requesting it. To more hate speech, the politics were accusing them of Facebook as a channel for hate speech. Now that the narrative is changing, so hate speech is no more a problem for the most important politicians in the United States. They are easing the moderation. They are not doing that because of profit. They are doing it because of they are aligning with the new political elite.
Hani is giving me a sign that we're done, so we can take this discussion. Very important topic, very interesting topic, lots of questions. Thank you all, and we have a coffee.